Geoff Kersey. While walking recently in Derbyshire on quite a dull day, I came across this really atmospheric scene in Beresford Dale, and I made a mental note to go back again in better weather conditions with my sketchbook and camera. So now I'm back in the studio. I've got my sketch and photographs in front of me, and I'm going to turn this into a painting. I've started by drawing it onto a sheet of rough paper, and I've put in some masking fluid. But the last bit of masking fluid I'm going to drop into a wet background to create a softer, more feathered look. So while the masking fluid is drying, I'm going to take the number, and so that I can have a nice bright glow in the sky, I'm taking some aureolin, plenty of water though, I don't want too vivid a yellow, and I'm going to add to that some burnt sienna, keeping it fairly thin so that it's a nice bright wash. Then I'm going to make a soft purple colour for the top of the sky with some cobalt blue and rose madder. Plenty of rose madder in it, so it's quite a warm blue. And then with a clean 1-inch flat brush, plenty of water on it, I'm going to coat the whole of the sky area, and I'm going to bring that clean water down below the top of the hills. It's important when you have a scene with hills or mountains in that you don't just stop painting the sky where the mountains start. Better to drop the water in behind them and use the sky as a sort of backdrop for the whole scene. Now I can still work with this flat brush for this sky, so I'm going to pick up the aureolin and burnt sienna and get that sort of warm glow right across the lower part of it. Clean the brush, and then I'm picking up the purpley blue, bringing that in from the top. Where it mixes with that orangey colour, you get almost a warm grey. It's a nice colour that sort of just happens on the paper. And we need to dry that before we carry on. So I'm going to mix some colours now for the background hill. Keeping it fairly soft and pale at first so it looks well in the distance. I'm starting with the same colour as the top of the sky, cobalt blue and rose madder, and I'm greying it this time with a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to get a smaller brush now, a number 10, and a bit of aureolin and burnt sienna, just like I used in the sky a few moments ago, but a little bit stronger this time. Then I want a stronger brown. I'm going to take some burnt sienna and cobalt blue again. And then finally I want a bit of dark green, and I'm going to take Viridian. This looks really strong Viridian, but it's a very good base for a dark green, and I'm going to add to it some ultramarine blue and then plenty of burnt sienna so that I get a real rich dark browny green. Okay, so the number 16 brush again, we'll start painting the distant hill with this thin purpley grey. I introduce a little bit of that warmth, that aureolin and burnt sienna. And then as I get further down, the darker colour, a bit of strength into it now. Coming right down to the water's edge, which I've protected with masking fluid. And then picking up the number 10 brush and the rich dark green. There's quite a lot of bushes and trees that are really strong dark colours as we get towards the water's edge here, and it's important that I have this ready and drop it in straight away, because you can see how I need it to soften into the background. Now while that's softening into there, I'm going to clean the brush, and still using this number 10 I'm going to get some more aureolin and burnt sienna, and I'm going to get a touch of green as well with aureolin and cobalt blue, also with a touch of raw sienna. So let's start building this bank up at the right hand side. Making the brush strokes follow the slope down to reach the water. And more of the brown in it. I've got masking fluid on the path, so I haven't got worried about being too careful at that side there. And then we'll have a hint more of the dark green. I've added a bit more burnt sienna to it to make it even darker. And we'll bring that in right in this bottom right hand corner, right where we meet the edge of the path. Using it to sort of describe the shape of the slope there. Maybe a few distant trees by using the edge of the brush to just describe some loose shapes. And I think to create a little bit of colour in there, a bit of brightness, I'm going to take a touch of lemon yellow with the number 8 brush, quite thick lemon yellow, and we'll add a little bit of brightness underneath the dark green. And a little bit of bright where the sun catches it at the water's edge there. Very point of the brush, dropping that in against the dark green. And we'll leave that to dry. I'm just going to mix a bit more of this grey to put the hill in at the left-hand side now. So it's cobalt blue, rose madder and burnt sienna. And starting quite high up at this left-hand side, we'll bring this down. It's quite craggy, so I want to make a few sharp marks with the point of the brush. Get the colour a little bit stronger in this area here. And I'm going to introduce with the number 10 brush that bit of aureolin and burnt sienna. So we've got a little bit of warmth, a little bit of light into there. Working quite rapidly so that the colour I put on hasn't dried before I put the next one on, so that we get a bit of blending and a bit of colour mixing actually on the paper. Some green. Let's take some aureolin and cobalt blue with a bit of raw sienna and start to drop a bit of green in at this left hand side. Then we'll take a bit more of the darker brown. This is the burnt sienna, cobalt blue and rose madder. Getting a bit more strength into it. I need a bit more strength into this hill to bring it further forward than the one I did earlier, to sort of really put it in front of it. And then bring these streaks down to meet the water's edge. A little bit of light, just like I had on the right hand side, by adding a touch of neat lemon yellow here and there. Round that off to where it meets the water, and then it's time to go in again with some more of that rich dark green, viridian, ultramarine blue and plenty of burnt sienna, a really rich browny green. Let's get some of this right at the water's edge here. Colour's always darkest nearest to the water. Don't have to be too careful around the pike because I've put masking fluid on it. So we'll give those colours a bit of time to blend while they dry. I think now that this is dried that the distant hill is a bit sharp, so I'm taking a number 10 brush with clean water on it. I've got a bit of tissue standing by and I'm going to just paint over that sharp edge with clean water, a little bit at a time. If you're too vigorous with the brushing at this stage, you can make the hill totally disappear. Whereas what I want to do is just fade it a bit so that it softens into the background. This is a good way to create a real feeling of distance in your pictures. And it just parts with the paint very slowly to just soften it and fade it back.